Cents Per Mile, featuring Charles Gracie, Paul Gibson, and Josh Haynes. Everyone knows the trucking industry has issues, but most people are afraid to talk about it.
Someone's got to do it.
With loads of recruiting and marketing experience and backed by the largest driver audience in the world, we deliver carriers the driver perspective, find solutions, and help make sense make sense.
Thank you for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your co-host, Paul Gibson.
Hey, I'm Josh Haynes. Charles, what are we talking about today?
Flipping your funnel.
Flipping my funnel?
But not your funnel, the recruiting funnel, your marketing funnel. And we got some great guests that are going to help us digest this and understand it, because it is one of those things that you're just not often hearing.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting take. I'm pretty excited to hear it get broken down. But before we do that, the normal, usual stuff. We are on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. We are also on YouTube, where you can see all of our wonderful faces. Either way, wherever you get our content, if you could, like, subscribe, rate, helps push us out further, gets us more reach, and we can do cooler stuff like we did last week when we went to that golf tournament.
You can also go to centspermilepodcast.com, where you could submit to be a guest for a topic, or to even become a sponsor to send us on one of those cool trips.
Sponsors? Who's our sponsor this week, Charles?
We have Decker Truck Line. You should check them out. You know, they're a great Class A carrier. You can find them at drivedecker.com.
Yep. And also, speaking of finding people and looking for them, you can find us at F3, the Future of Freight Festival put on by FreightWaves. In Chattanooga, it's like the week before Thanksgiving. It's going to be awesome. And, you know, sometimes the tickets can be a little pricey, but you know some people who will be there. And there is a link that you can click, or a QR code on the screen, to get a pretty solid discount, because you know a couple people.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time, just like today's show.
All right. Well, that being said, it is time for the news. All right, so it's time for 10-2 News, where we go through CDLLife. We break down some of the most relevant, most interesting, and craziest articles we could find from the past few weeks. So number one, a man in a stolen big rig leads police on chase, crashes into storage facility, Texas sheriff says. So essentially what happened is this guy stole a truck with a trailer behind it and took off. And it turned into a pretty long police chase. But then he went to take a curve and lost control and ran into a storage facility, which is why you should leave driving a semi-truck to the professionals.
Absolutely. And the pictures do this no justice. I mean, you look at it, it's totaled. He's in a storage facility, clips the corner, it's all in the cab.
Yep. Oh yeah, no, that thing's pretty it almost looks like it. I mean, I don't know what it looked like before the crash, but it almost looks like someone dumped and dried a couple paint cans on it.
I want to just know, like, that's a lot of plywood. And, well, if you look at the corner of the picture, you got the roll-up door. So I mean, yeah, checks out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a storage facility. They're not exactly known for being well insulated.
It brings a whole new meaning to Storage Wars, you know, that show.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, that being said, obviously hurricanes are very serious. We make a lot of jokes. But they are a very serious thing, especially with the level of things, even at the point that we recorded this, you know, what's going on. You know, it's bad enough where Charles, you and Chattanooga have even, you know, had a decent amount of issues that far inland.
Not nearly as bad as the other people out there, but this next story kind of it hits home because people came together to form a solution in a bad time. You know, an isolated town in North Carolina uses flatbed trailers to build a bridge so people can bring them supplies for relief. You know, the storm decimated a lot of areas, and this was one of them that was impacted. People could not get them supplies. They were flat out told, without a bridge, you get no supplies. And so they turned around and took some of the broke down flatbed trailers and built a bridge so people can get them supplies.
Yep. And it was a more remote, like one way in, one way out kind of town. Actually called Elk Park, North Carolina. And yeah, so they all just they needed a way in and out of necessity. They all worked together and basically made a bridge out of flatbed trailers. So that's awesome to see a little bit of good news come out of all of that. Now, on to the future. Nearly 24,000 electric Nissan cars recalled for lithium ion battery overheating. Basically, there are a bunch of Nissan Leafs. The batteries started to overheat, which, being lithium batteries, probably not a great time. So, the reason why I added this story, though, Charles, is I wanted your take.
Because I'm a Ford guy.
No, I'm no, that is definitely automotive is not something I would consider you an expert in at that point with that criteria. That's fine. Fixer repair daily, right? Is what they say. So my question is that as a driver, obviously, your engine can blow. There's lots of things that can go wrong on a truck. But if you're riding along in a truck and then all of a sudden your battery starts to overheat, what is your reaction?
Get out. Have you seen what happens when these electric vehicles, all those batteries catch on fire? I'll take my chances in a diesel all day, every day. Sitting on top of those batteries, that's a terrible situation.
Well, and that's what I mean. Like looking to the future, I mean that's a thing. That is absolutely a thing.
Paul, I'm not in the truck anymore. I've already looked into the future. I didn't like what I saw.
Fair enough. But I guess from like a safety standpoint, is that worse than anything that could happen from like a brake fire or tire fire, anything like that?
Well, I mean, each one has its own respective fears. If you're the driver, like if I'm going through the mountains in Chattanooga and my brakes catch on fire, I'm gonna have a bad day. Those runoff ramps are meant to stop the truck, not help the driver in surviving. Uh, with sitting on top of a bunch of burning batteries in these electric vehicles, I would not want to be in that situation. We've seen what happens when these battery facilities catch on fire. It's like a large flare gun going off. It burns hot and it takes them days to put it out. So sitting on top of that truck and being in it as a driver is a terrible day.
All right. Well, our last story. So court orders $225,000 seized by police during traffic stop must be returned to semi-truck driver. Okay, so this guy is driving in his truck. He's doing 74 and a 70, so he's speeding.
In Mississippi.
And yeah, so he had a duffel bag. I can see how this could seem weird. He had a duffel bag of that amount of money, but it was all in envelopes at $5,000 per envelope. And he didn't have any drugs on his truck. He didn't have any weapons, anything illegal. He was running paper logs because his ELD was messed up. Now, they did find that duffel bag full of money, and the cops were like, man, you're going from here to Atlanta, even though he wasn't going to Atlanta. I think he was going like a couple hours south. You're going through a lot of places where drugs get trafficked, so we're going to assume that that's what this is for, and they grabbed all the money. And then he took it, it went to court, obviously, and the court was like, yeah, I don't know about that, man. And then he got it appealed, and when it went to the circuit court was like, the state has the burden of proof, and there is absolutely no proof.
I mean, it's sketchy. Who's driving around with that much money in a duffel bag? But at the same time, yes, the laws and how we enforce them exist for a reason. So I can't see anyone failing to meet the burden of proof being able to seize $225,000 from someone.
Well, I mean, civil forfeiture is a pretty interesting thing. But that's pretty much what we got for the news. I think it is time to go.
Maybe before we go to Tenstreet, maybe it's just the sign-on bonuses he got from the, those really good trucking jobs that are out there that we hear all the time. Amazing sign-on bonuses. That's what that is.
By no way is cents per mile endorsing that amount for a sign-on bonus. It's not sustainable.
I would disagree. I want you to offer that. I will go right now.
You don't have a CDL, Paul.
Hey everyone, Justin Walters here with Tenstreet. I wanted to quickly introduce how I like to flip the funnel by looking at what has made you successful, then replicating it to improve your overall success. Without the right tools, many recruiting departments focus on stuffing the top of the funnel with as many candidates as possible. It's a hopeful strategy, generally inefficient, costly, and it leads to low conversion numbers. Now, at Tenstreet, we flip the funnel on its head by using the tools like Success Center and other in-depth reports to analyze what's coming out of your funnel. Instead of focusing on the volume, We really like to identify which applicants, the channels, and the processes that are delivering the best hires. We use the job store where you can see your highest quality of candidates and where they're coming from, but also work backwards so we can also optimize those channels with the job store concierge team. They're really there to help you guys lead the charge. We pinpoint those successful touch points where you can focus on the efforts and replicating what's working and making sure the process is precise and cost effective. So, we even are able to take a more in-depth look at pulse match. For instance, like it lets you target candidates based on specific preferences and behaviors rather than just casting that wide net. So the result, better hires, improved retention, a lot less wasted time moving away from the old funnel stuffing mentality. I'll be back in a few weeks to talk more about how drivers or how to use it, optimize your funnel to where just because they might not be interested or qualified today, where they could be interested or qualified tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, so it's time to make sense, and talk about our main topic, which is flipping your funnel. Charles, what it reminds me of bottle flipping. Is the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know why all those TikTok videos of that. Yeah, pretty much. But obviously marketing funnels, you start wide and you got a lot of touch points and you bring people in and you slowly get them more specific information the closer they get to being a decision maker and making a decision after a certain amount of touch points. So what does it mean to flip your funnel? Does that mean you start specific and get broader?
Well, it means to look at what's coming out of the funnel successfully and to build around that so that you can target that more appropriately at the front of the funnel, which in theory should lower your cost and increase your results. It's something that I personally, being on the recruiting side, we always look what comes out of the funnel, but it wasn't until I had a great conversation with Bobby over on CDLLife that it led us to evaluate this from a different perspective, where you look at what's coming out of the funnel and you target that more direct and you get better results. And we've seen great success for those that have deployed this kind of thinking in their standard operating procedure for finding today's top talent.
Well, and that kind of makes sense. So like for instance, if you start with a really broad funnel, and you're going after A, B, C, D, and E demographic, but you haven't ever gotten part of the last demographic at all, ever at any point, then you could technically narrow that down to the first four demographics. You don't need to actually put anything out there.
And you can isolate what those paths look like for that success. So you can reinforce those and maybe put attention in the areas that have been unsuccessful. It's more surgical approach to getting in front of the desired audience that you're trying to put your message out in front of and getting the results that you're spending marketing dollars to drive. There's nothing more aggravating than people just saying stuff the top of the funnel, stuff the top of the funnel. Nowadays in the world we live in, anyone can stuff the top of the funnel. For someone to be a good partner in helping you find today's top talent, you have to have people that are willing to take a more surgical approach. And that's where we see these conversations starting to go. And that's where you start seeing strategic partnerships being formed. And I mean, that's why I brought Bobby on for today's show. Between my conversations with him, he's really caused me to have different insights on how we tackle this from a data perspective and what he does daily.
So here's a question, and this is kind of a side skirt, and maybe somebody smarter than me can answer. Hopefully, even maybe somebody smarter than you, Charles, would definitely be able to answer. So you kind of mentioned like going down the funnel, and there being something that you noticed in the funnel that might not be as effective, and then you said something about working on that. Before we get too far into it, just one question that I would also like to have answered by the end of this is, at what point do you try to fix what's at that point of the funnel to make it work better, or do you just disregard that like you would the other things that you're not trying to get into the funnel anymore? So if there's a part that doesn't work, do you just get rid of it, or do you try to double down and fix it?
And what it comes down to is being able to look at that data and analyze it and see, is it what we're trying to do that's not working and something else working and we need to shift our attention there? But you would never know if you're only paying attention to the final product that came out of the funnel. You have to be able to look inside the funnel and say, hey, is this working? Is this not? Or in the words of Robert Pearson, is my baby ugly?
It's still one of my favorites. All right. Well, one person that, I mean, has experienced the back end of this is Bryan.
We got Bryan Schafer from Decker Truck Lines joining us. Bryan, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here. You guys have been a huge supporter of the show. We've had some great conversations. But in today's topic, flipping your funnel, you've actually been on the receiving side of having that done and seeing how that works for your organization. So I really wanted to pull you on the show to kind of share that experience.
Mm-hmm. So I've always hated the term funnel. I always say it's a fan, and we've always just thrown everything we got at the fan to see what sticks to the wall. And so my approach to this is one, it's you're lowering the speed of the fan to allow more things to come through, and you're throwing less things at it. So if you stay with the funnel, Paul, I think you mentioned it. You're closing that funnel down a little bit. So, every app you get is a phone call, and how many points of contact. So if you get a whole bunch that you don't need, you're just swamping your people down, and you're wasting time cutting through the chaff to try to to find the wheat. So looking to see what the end product is, and then turn around and saying to your vendors, hey, find me more like this, so I'm not wasting all my time. It just streamlines the whole process and frees up more time to have better conversations and find the right drivers.
So what you're saying is by doing this, it has allowed your people and your team to do what they do best, which is find those drivers, hire those drivers. But in doing so, I imagine there's some other benefits to doing this. So from your experience, as far as like the cost, because that's the one thing all of our viewers are going to wonder is like, well, what's this cost? What have you seen in this and deploying this out within your organization as far as driving down cost or driving it up?
One is lost time cost. I think prior to getting into this, like any recruiting, you would see 50 to 60% of your application, your declines, your turn downs being no contact, where we're now seeing that's less than 20%. So we're getting an audience that is engaged and wants to spend time with us. So now we're actually the ones, we're having conversations and either hiring them or declining them, but we're having those conversations. So you can't really figure out your cost per recruiter per hour and start figuring that out. We've seen probably a 30% reduction in application to hire. So, we don't need as many apps, which means I don't have to spend as much money. So take whatever your cost per lead is and reduce that by X amount. And the other thing too is just the longevity of it. When you're getting people that want to work for you, not into the conversation. Who are you again? They're actively seeking us out and wanting to work for us, and we're reinforcing that and bringing them on. That helps your longevity. So we don't need to hire as many people because you're not losing as many people with that. So, finding the right people right off the bat. And then one you can't put a price in is your recruiter satisfaction. I mean, when you sit there and you're just dialing and smiling all day long and you're getting kind of down in the dumps, it makes it hard to pick up the phone and engage yourself in that driver and really sell the company. So your recruiter satisfaction goes up because, this is money. Every phone call is money, and they're wanting to dial the phone and make those connections.
So I just want to recap that a little bit, because if we look at the benefits of doing this, and I imagine there's a bit of a lift in having a strategic partner that can help you achieve this, someone that's willing to get more surgical in their approach. You've driven down your cost. you've driven down your waste, and you've increased satisfaction amongst the recruiters, which I imagine translates over into a better experience for the drivers because they're being approached in a way that works rather than trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So, I mean, does that kind of sum it up pretty well?
Yeah. Plus, I save on tires. They're not cutting them.
Unless you're in Tennessee, they still have that person out there. When we're looking at this from a recruiting perspective, it seems like that approach checks a lot of the boxes that are pain points in most recruiting departments right now. And you guys, you're not no small operation. So these things had to be critical in a market such as what we find ourselves in right now, where things are tight and people have to be very aware of what they're doing and confident behind. Otherwise, it can hurt them more than help them.
Yeah, I would say, as in recruiting, operations always comes to you and says, hey, Jake Brake is our best driver. Give me 20 more like Jake Brake. And you're like, I can't clone this or whatever. But why can't you say, okay, look at what came out of the funnel and say, this is what I want. And then turn around to your vendors and say, find me more of these Jake Brakes. And that's what happened. So it really worked. But it is a good partnership. There's a lot of communication that's involved with it. You are looking at the data, but it's well worth the time.
Well, and I think that's part of rolling up your sleeves and being innovative in your approach, which you guys are constantly doing. You're constantly evolving, and you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable in order to see progression. So if someone wanted to join your team or pick your brain, how would they find you, Bryan?
They give us a call, 877-233-2537, or go to our website, drivedecker.com.
Well, hey, Bryan, it's a pleasure as always, but I think Paul's got one more thing to add on, so I'm going to turn over the mic to him.
All right, Bryan, I'm pretty sure we've already asked you this question, and I'm pretty sure you already gave an answer, but I'm going to give you the first opportunity out of anybody on the show to change your mind. Who's your favorite?
Oh, it's got to be Josh.
He knows.
He was here. He was the only, when you guys did the photo shoot, he was the only one that was actually paying attention. And
What?
See, Bryan knows I'm the one that makes the money come in. With that being said, it's time to pay some bills.
Hot Seat Services has Rent-A-Recruiter.
Wait!
Hey Michael, have you heard that Hot Seat Services Rent-A-Recruiter service will place their staff in your organization similar to a temporary hire model?
No way, what else does it do?
Follow me, I have to tell everyone. They take leads in existing databases to put new hires into your business's trucks.
Well, shiver me timbers! What else?
Come on! Their model is more cost efficient because their recruiters are trained and can get your pipeline flowing easier and faster.
No way. Anything else?
No matter how many hires they make, it's a set cost per week, so the more they get, the better their client's cost per hire gets.
Holy sh**.
For more information and to find out for yourself, go to hotseatservices.com.
All right, well, that was some very enlightening stuff. I feel like I know more about this concept now. But I also would like to say that I obviously, this seems very sound and very data-driven. I kind of don't know, man, because the second they started trying to flip the funnel is also the same time that sick Decker ad that we just watched came out, which me and Josh did film on a golf cart. I don't know, man. What's the real driving force?
Honestly, it's been very insightful to see people take a more surgical approach on this because there's a lot of money that gets dumped into the front of the funnel, but very little that comes out and manifests into hires. And when you're looking for partnerships and you're looking to move the needle in a market like this, you really need to start looking at more innovative approaches. And that's one of the reasons that when I first heard about this, it threw me off too. I've been doing this a long time, threw me off too. But then the more I dived into it and the more I had those conversations, the more I realized this is the path forward. This is the industry tomorrow, and this is what everyone's going to be doing. So either you can wait to be on the back end of that curve, or you could be ahead of it, which is why I brought Bobby.
Because you've actually done it, like day to day implemented this in like the way that Hot Seat does things.
Yeah, we've implemented it and used our strategic partnership with CDLLife and people like Bobby and experiences to not only drive that forward for us internally, but for our clients, which is actually why I brought Bobby on, because this conversation can't go further without him. I mean, this is the brains behind this. So, Bobby, welcome.
Hey, guys. Good to be back.
Yeah, Bobby, you're over at CDLLife. You guys are constantly innovating new technology and methods to help tackle the madness that we consider today's recruiting. You and I have had countless talks on what this looks like versus the perception of what people think it looks like. So tell us a little bit about your experience with flipping the funnel.
Yeah, sure. So I think in truck driver recruitment, we often smush kind of two things into one. The first one is really capturing people that are already interested in working for you. That's having a good website. That's, search terms and stuff like that to say, hey, I want to work for you. I got to find you, and I don't want to get distracted by searching somewhere else. We smush that in with what is really just advertising. It's trying to convince people to work for you, right? It's the same as any other business that's advertising, trying to get you to buy shoes, trying to get you to buy a T-shirt, trying to get you to buy beer. You have to convince people. You have to give them a reason. You have to give them a story, right? And the concept of flipping the funnel is to say, who are the best people that we actually want to buy this? If you're a B2B company, it would be who are the biggest customers that we could sell. If you're a shoe company, it's what's my demographic. And I'm probably not going to sell to 300 million people in America. So let's narrow it down and figure out who I'm going to sell to. And so the concept behind flipping the funnel is you narrate it to those people, and then you build an entire world for those people around a story about why you should do the thing. So in truck driver recruiting, it's why you would work for that company. And you can get a lot more bang for your buck if you narrow that down and surround people, then spread it wide and see who shoves into the top of the funnel. Another way to kind of think about it is if you've ever felt like a company is everywhere and you're getting advertised to all the time by them, it might be that they're everywhere for you. And you know everything about them and you can't forget them. But a ton of people have never heard of them because it's better to show you 100 things than to show 100 people one thing, right?
So that's an interesting take because we know one of the pain points in recruiting is, all right, anyone can stuff the top of the funnel nowadays. Getting a name, an email, a phone number, it's not hard. But to sit there and maintain their interest throughout the recruiting process, which depending on the carrier, depends on how long or short that process might be. And it's not a cookie cutter approach. Each carrier is different. I see it. I work with so many just like yourself. You can't go into it with a cookie cutter approach. Otherwise it's going to fail. So it seems like you're kind of molding this to not only support finding the right people at the front of the funnel, but also helping them find a path through the backside of the funnel, which then translates into hires.
Yeah, that's right. So first of all, not every carrier is the same, not every message is the same, but also not every driver is the same. So you have to kind of match their expectations and their journeys, right? And so, as you say, not just shoving people to the top of the funnel, it also means that marketing doesn't stop the moment you get a lead, right? If you keep advertising to people, and we did this with Bryan, and if you keep advertising to people while they're in the recruitment workflow, while they're scheduled for orientation, you remind them what it was that convinced them to work there to begin with, instead of them getting distracted and advertised by somebody else's great, offer. And so that's sort of the catering the message to people at the right time, and never letting that sort of story fall off, midway through the process.
Well, and that's one of the reasons. So when this concept was first introduced, we've had countless conversations about these driver journeys, the funnel. But you and I got to collaborate working with Decker and Bryan on this. And that's why I thought it was really important to show his perspective, because if I'm a carrier and I'm sitting there and someone says, flip my funnel, I'm thinking you're about to flip my entire operation upside down. And it's not that. All you're doing is looking at things more analytical to have a more surgical approach with how you're presenting your company, how you're presenting your efforts, and how you're setting up your recruiters for the greatest success. And when we heard those stats from his perspective as a carrier, this starts to, warm up inside, and I start to be more receptive when I'm not thinking you're about to turn my entire operation upside down.
Yeah, it's turning the math and a lot of the way you think about it upside down, not necessarily the operation. I think there's a couple changes that may be noticed from a recruiting department. One would be sort of a term we've talked about with people is it's something like your recovery rate, the number of leads that you previously dispositioned as out of the funnel, right? Not interested, not qualified, that sort of stuff. How many do you end up hiring from that? And what we could do is actually increase that significantly. And that's cool, because what that means is it's people that have already heard your story multiple times. It's people that you already know of, so they're a little less expensive to go find. It's people that are a little more familiar with your process, right? And so it requires maybe a little bit more openness from recruiters to talk to a person a second time. But that's not increased contact rate, less waste, less nuisance, that sort of stuff, right? Just because somebody isn't ready today doesn't mean they won't be in a month. That's very common in all purchases. It's common in jobs, right?
So one question that I would have real quick, because when I hear that, it's kind of like Charles was mentioning, like taking everything and flipping it upside down. One thing that I would be worried about if I just heard this just blanketly, one one thing I would be worried about if I just heard that just randomly is that possibly cutting the circulation down of what's going to end up coming out of the end of the funnel. And I understand that it's like better and higher quality, but how do you decide how far to narrow the top of that funnel? Do you typically go like, how do you know if you went too far? Is it something you should ease into? What does that look like?
Well, it's not really about narrowing it arbitrarily. It's about and it's flipping, not narrowing. It's finding the people that are actually qualified and fit the market for you and would be willing to work for you, right? And then you go, I'm not going to bother with any other advertisement anywhere if I don't have to, right? So it's not. I'm not going to say, if you want to hire 100 people a month, I'm not going to randomly say, hey, let's only target 1,000 people. That's it. We're done. It's more. You could run the math on. There's carriers that do $500,000 a month in marketing. You do that 2 years in a row, and you run the math, and you go, we targeted 90% of all drivers in the industry. I mean, I don't know if the math's accurate there, right? But it's like you're not going to hire most of those people. There's a lot of people that are never going to work for a large carrier, or some people are never going to work for a small carrier. Some people are never going to do anything but drop and hook, that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of not waste your time with the trying to kind of come up with a larger funnel just to do it. Now, that doesn't mean you're cutting in half just to cut in half.
Yeah, and I think that's important when you're looking at this. To summarize all of this, you're building out profiles for what's coming out the funnel successfully, and then you're using that to help you target more precisely those same type of people and put them on those successful paths throughout the funnel moving forward, which then lowers your cost, lowers all the fall off, and significantly increases your chances of converting those with your recruiting team, while, according to Bryan, also improving the experience for the recruiting team.
Yeah, that's the goal. Less waste, lower costs, better satisfaction, better connections, better drivers for the company in the long run.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you for coming in and helping us break this down on cents per mile, Bobby. Truly appreciate the conversation and sharing that with the audience.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, guys. And Josh is my favorite too. He's got a Chief sweater. So,
see, there it is. He just came in. Didn't even have to ask him the question.
I've got a Royals hat on. The Chiefs aren't in the Chiefs aren't in the we're not in the playoffs yet.
This is Chiefs country. This is Chiefs country, Paul.
They're in the same parking lot.
Listen, it's fine. It's fine. All we had to hear was Bobby say, Josh is my favorite. And that's 2. I'm 2 for 2 today. Just like the Chiefs is going for 3. All right, Charles, get us out of here.
Hey, like all good things that got to come to an end, so do we. Thanks for tuning in to Cents Per Mile. I'm your host, Charles Gracie.
And I'm your favorite co-host, Paul Gibson. See you next time.